I'm ready to slash and burn.
Jason and I were really good buddies from college, and
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And continuing on with a theme lately of talking to some of the newer rookie teams, although this gentleman with me today is not necessarily new to Battlebots, just bringing a different robot into the game for the future. Brad of Triton, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you for the first time.
Yes, absolutely. So I am definitely excited to have you on. Triton is definitely an interesting robot. Kind of a successor of sorts to Deep Six, but with a different weapon because it's horizontal and not vertical. So I'm sure very much the same level of destructive power that we would all be looking forward to there. Before we get too into Triton, I just kind of want to go back and circle back on your background coming into this, because I mean, like I said, you've been doing this for a while, but just involved with other teams and stuff. Everybody knows from Deep Six, obviously, but kind of talk about what you've done up to this point with Triton.
With Triton or in my previous past?
Before, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so it's a long story. I've been doing combat robotics for at least 18 years. I think it's 19 years now. Sometimes I tell people 20 just because it's an easy round number, but it's coming up on that point of 20 years of combat robotics. And I started way back in 2003 or 2004. I had originally, when I was younger than that even, I had saw Battlebots on Comedy Central. I was super excited about it. I went to my hobby shop with my parents to get a birthday gift, and I wanted to build a robot, and the hobby shop kind of sold me into RC cars. I wanted to do helicopters or something more exciting. No, RC cars. So I did RC cars, little electric on-road, gas or nitro rather on-road cars and monster trucks and stuff, and super exciting. And I went to RCX, which is a radio-controlled expo. Big event, super cool. And I go there, and live in person is Steel Conflict, which is kind of a remnant coming from BattleBots. They had up to super heavyweights. So they had, 340-pound robots, 220, all the way down to 1-pound combat robots. And I thought that was perfect because it's a very small robot. You can build it yourself, more cost efficient to get into it. So the next year, I brought my first robot, which is called Corrosive. It's this little composite little robot that was made of a kit from a VDD kit. And I got third place out of 30 other robots. It was really impressive for, just coming out of nowhere. And the guy that sold the kit was Ted Shimoda. And Ted Shimoda had been with Team Think Tank, which had been on BattleBots with a couple of robots, had built every weight class before, had tons of robots at Steel Conflict. And the guy had just been building, but he was kind of not that well known, and he still is not that well known. And I've now been associated with a lot of different builders, and I still regard Ted as one of the top tier builders. And he taught me more than anyone else in my entire life in terms of mechanical engineering, ability to build things. So I kind of got associated with his team, and from there I built all different weight classes. I've built and driven a robot of every weight class, from 150 gram, 1 pound, 3 pound, 12, 15 pound, 30, 60, 120, 220. I've worked on 340s. I've never actually driven a 340, but I've worked on all these different robots, and I got into it. And then BattleBots came back on air. They asked us for season 1. We were not ready to do that. We didn't have, the time frame was not right and all that. And season 2 rolled around, and we were ready. By the time contracts, everything got settled, we still didn't have a lot of time. So the robot for season 2 was Bad Kitty. And that robot was not finished. It fought, and we kind of finished it at the event to a point, but we were known for composite robots. So these were built with fiberglass, Kevlar, carbon fiber, Dyneema Spectra, all these fancy materials, and they're sculpted and structured a lot differently than a metal robot. And that's kind of the process of me getting into it. And from that season, it didn't go so well. We weren't super happy with it. And after that, I had kind of started to join some other teams and help other teams out. So I went to China for King of Bots, and I originally went with Megabyte or Gigabyte, John Malandic, and had an amazing experience in China. After that, I went with Kronos to China as well, and Kronos was a friend of mine, Jerry. with Team Ghetto Logic Robotics, and Kronos was just an amazing robot. I love ring spinners, and it's kind of funny because I went from a shell spinner to a ring spinner. And before that, in Robo Games, we had built a shell spinner too. I keep building on these shell spinners, and our team was originally known for a vertical disc, VDD, VD, and a number, and that was always a vertical disc spinner. That's what I drove. That's what I knew. That's like my best robot. But I've been with Megabyte, been with Kronos, and then after China with Kronos, we actually came into BattleBots and helped out with Captain Shredderator. So one season of Captain Shredder, like half the fights that's Captain Shredder, so another shell spinner. And after that, then we did Kronos on BattleBots as well, and that was really fun. And now I helped out with Deep Six, so I got back to my roots of a vertical spinner, and that is the biggest vertical spinner you could possibly have. And Dustin S-Wing has been, very inspirational on Full Send. I don't think I would ever personally do such a ridiculous robot. And if you had more weight, Dustin would just put it more weight in the weapon. And that's where we were at before Triton is coming in a Deep Six, working with Dustin, and just getting a robot that when it first appeared was overly ridiculous, and then because of them making the Deep Six rule where you can't have that weapon weigh more than 80 pounds, he was forced to make it into what it was, which ended up being more functional than it ever had been. So it can self-right, it drives around really well, and it showed that it was capable of doing stuff. And so from there, we're now where we're at, going into Triton.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely excited about the new robot. Obviously, as I'm sure that it was to all of you, disappointing with what the situation became with Deep Six, and even though making the robot, or not making the weapon smaller, but it's still the destructive power seemed to be quite a lot. Which, I mean, honestly, that was one of the things that I loved about Deep Six was the destructive power, and it looked really good in the Sin City Slugfest. Like, that's the best that I've ever seen that robot. So
Dustin has gone on
it
was an amazing performance. He was very
really
conservative about driving.
thing
It's
about it was
very difficult to drive with such a large weapon. You have gyroscopic precession. It tends to want to go crazy, and that's why it's so wide. It has to be that wide in order to be stable on turning. But even though, if you saw it, especially in the very last fight against Ribot, where it's turning and the whole thing is just gyroing, and it's just it's like dancing in the air. And Dustin had started really conservatively with those kind of maneuvers. He was very simple movements, trying to keep it under control, keep it facing. And as it progressed, and we didn't do as well, but then we go into that slugfest, he was like full send mode, and he really started. You saw the driving capability of it, and he was really aggressive with it. And you have to kind of. It's really hard to test this robot in general. Where can you test it other than a giant battle box, pretty much, because it's just so large. It's so hard to contain to feel it out. So he got to feel it out in that process and understand how to really make it do some of those maneuvers. And in another year, he would have probably had it down. Not only were we going to be building it superior to what it was, had better protect, like wheels were going to be protected, a lot of simple mechanical changes to make it even better. He would have been able to drive it far superior to what he was before because of that experience that he really required to do that. And so we were super excited about it. And obviously it's been very dangerous to arenas and test boxes. And so it's, I'm not surprised, but at the same time, personally, it's one of my favorite robots ever. It's just so spectacular. You don't know what's going to happen. It's just magnificent as a robot to me. And if you've, because I've worked on all different robots, I tend to have a thing where I enjoy working on new challenges. I'd rather not sit and make the same robot time after time and tweak it slightly. I like building new machines or working on new machines that have new challenges and fixing major things. And, I've always done little things like that, and I've really enjoyed that. So I was very happy to be with Deep Six and kind of work towards making it, great. It definitely is a disappointment, and I'm sure there's fans out there that are like me that just love to see the thing fight. Even if I was not part of it, I would just love to see that thing fight continually. It's not necessarily designed that is like, oh, it's going to win. It's so capable. You never know what happens, and you always try to win, but it's really a design for a show.
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely the way that I've always seen it. So I'm curious though, obviously moving from that into Triton, what all kind of went into conceptualizing Triton in the first place, and what has that process been really up to this point?
Yeah, so when Dustin, started doing applications for Battlebots for season 7, we basically had put in the Deep Six design, which was an improved design, had changes, and had been, pretty well thought out and worked on. And we were pretty confident on that going forward. But he also put in Triton as a design. And it was originally kind of a conceptual design, not super fleshed out, but it looked good. It had a really good appearance. And they didn't really want Deep Six because of the damage and destruction, but they liked Triton. And I don't know how much of that was because of like Tombstone not being able to be there or something along those lines, but this is one of the largest robots. Like, Deep Six is big, but Triton horizontally is just massive. It really is essentially a horizontal Deep Six, and a lot of inspiration. This robot was almost completely designed by Dustin. I helped design like the weapon bar along with Shay Johns, and he like finalized that weapon bar design. But like everything has gone through Dustin. This is essentially Dustin's robot that I'm bringing to life for him. He just could not make it because he's having twins. He's a big family guy, and he's unable to make it. And but it originally conceptually came from a robot that has been seen at Norwalk or the NHRL, which is Depth Charge. And now Depth Charge is, of course, a bristle bot. It vibrates and walks around. So it's a little different because it will have wheels, but it's very much a take on, ooh, horizontals are fun. Let's build the largest horizontal you could possibly imagine. And if we're not allowed to have Deep Six, and a lot of it is because of the verticality that happens to occur when it tumbles around and stuff. We've seen Tombstone be pretty hazardous to the arena, but it's a lot more controllable because it's horizontal. So let's build something giant. And I think that, I really hope that fans are going to be excited for it, because I'm super excited for it. And we haven't really revealed the design yet to everyone. And we're working on kind of planning to release that slowly, but I'm just super excited about it. And we're getting parts in now all the time. So I'm just really hyped about it myself.
I'm sure. And what's so funny is, I mean, I'm sure that you remember when this was done, but like the after the slugfest, at some point there were like pretend photos, or not pretend photos, but like photos posted of essentially like blood sport with Deep Six's weapon. And I was like, I want to see that happen. And then now it's happening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that essentially is what's happening to some degree. I know there's some other guys that we like taking the big bar, especially the 110 bar that we still have, that big bar, or even the Reaper bar that Deep Six has there in that picture. But and just seeing what it would be on another robot, like what if Bloodsport had that? What if Tombstone had that? I mean, Tombstone couldn't fit it; it's too big. But like, we've thought about these kind of things, and I'd love to see some other robot utilizing our weapons, because they are really big.
Yeah, it's just like I'm excited to see it. Now obviously I'm also excited to see, potentially what kind of matchups may generate from that. And anybody who watches my show knows that I always ask this question, but like, who do you think would be some fun matchups for Triton?
Well, that's really interesting. So it's so different because going from Deep Six to Triton, you're now going horizontal. A lot of matchups are very interesting in the respect of there are a lot of verticals. And those kind of four-wheel drive verticals usually are pretty juicy because they have high up supports, or they're, and we are able to kind of change Triton's hit height to kind of match depending on who we're fighting. A lot of people still have their big plows. Tombstone has basically forced people to always have some kind of big plow. And of course, there's still robots like Valkyrie and Hijinks, and even like Bloodsport. There's tons of horizontals that warrant the need for some type of horizontal protection. There's usually big plows, and those are hard to get through. And so I'm thinking of that there's so many of those robots will have things like that will have to kind of be adaptive to hitting at particular heights. So robots that have a lot of verticality are usually good for us, because we could potentially hit different things. You know, weapon on weapon, nobody can really reach us that well. So in theory, you know, any other horizontal would be a fun matchup for us. And yeah, I'm really intrigued. I don't necessarily have I'm always so scared of answering this question too, especially like because this is the thing is like they always like to create stories and you talked you shit talk this robot or this robot and now it's like now they're gonna make them fight, you know. And while there's like a lot of history with a lot of people I've worked with, I you know generally, as most people know, we're all pretty much friends, so I don't necessarily want to fight anyone in particular, but there's obviously some matchups that would be pretty spectacular, and I think we could take on a lot of robots. I think, you know, I'm more worried about certain robots rather than wanting to fight certain robots, because certain robots that have big plows, big wedges, and have a lot of drive capability scare me simply because of the arena. That shelf's still going to be there. It's a massive blunder to any horizontal. It basically creates such, especially with Triton, how big it is. We can't fit in those corners very well that are present. So it's really cutting the arena, not in half, but like at least a third is gone to reasonable space. And we can just get pushed around and stop. Now, I hope in the future they take that out and they give us back the horizontal equality that we need, you know, fighting for horizontal rights here. Because honestly, the arena is absolutely terrible for horizontals. It's an absolute travesty. It basically benefits flipping robots, control robots, and or you know a lot of the verticals that are already there. And they have tons of verticals, and I love verticals. That's my thing. But at the same time, it's like you're cutting out a part of the field by having this giant section that just disrupts horizontal so heavily. And I've seen Megabyte, you know, get stuck in that little corner and they can't get out quick enough. And you know, you need a certain amount of space to spin up. So I am very worried about that, and therefore I'm worried about robots that have big drive platforms, big wedges. I don't like to call robots out. I mean, I love to see anytime you have a giant robot, it's fun to fight other giant robots like Mammoth or something. Like I love to fight Mammoth. That'd be super fun. You know, Huge would be interesting because Deep Six was built perfectly for Huge. The fact that they made Huge fight us was silly because it was like it was our fight to lose. There's no reason why Huge should have won that fight. It's no fault of their own. It's just the design of Deep Six is like perfect for Huge. So it's our fight to lose in that regard. Triton would have a lot more difficulty fighting Huge now. And you know, I don't think it'd be necessarily that great of a fight, but you know, that's I'm sure something that they could consider throwing at us just because. But yeah, I'd love to fight any kind of big vertical just because we could really tear into, and that's one of you know, you have a rock paper scissors of combat robots. It used to be kind of like the wedge horizontal vert. It's a lot of subdivisions now that really change things up in that regard, but generally speaking, a horizontal is better against a vertical spinner because they have the straight upright frame and you're able to tweak their weapon and so forth. It's a little easier to reach and all that. So generally speaking, the horizontal beats a vertical. But like I said, those plows, I'm really worried, and some of those different robots are just going to be difficult to match up against.
Now, I don't want to wish this on you, but I personally would love to see what Triton could do against Endgame. Just
Oh.
because Endgame is known for being one of the most destructive verts out there. I mean, I'm still convinced, like at least the last couple of years, that Minotaur is the only team that has them figured out. But I would be curious to see how that would match up.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Minotaur versus Endgame, drums are usually better. Smaller diameters means you can spin faster, which means you get to bite on a larger vert. So, and Minotaur is a little brick of a robot. Endgame very much is a larger brick. It is a brick of a robot. The walls are extremely thick, and they do have a lot of wedge game. I mean, they have all sorts of wedge game. So that could be difficult. But you know, if we set ourselves up right, I think it would be a good fight. And obviously, challenging someone that's won the championship is always a good, you know, good fight to see on air, anyways. You know, Triton is just all weapon, really. It really is all weapon. And you know, as long as a robot doesn't have too powerful of a drive and too big of a wedge, that's game on for me. You know, I'd love to fight it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you had talked before about like the NHRL, you know, experience and stuff like that. I know that you had gone this past weekend to be a judge there. I do want to talk a little bit about that because I like to bring it up on my show. I think that it's such a great like place to start for a lot of people and a really great proving ground for concepts and designs and things like that to potentially scale them up. So what's your take on NHRL and stuff like that as a kind of way to scale up into BattleBots?
So I'd love to preface this with basically talking a bit about my other background. And I've built a lot of robots, but additionally, we've ran a lot of events. So throughout these like 18 years, we've also run events. We used to have events almost every other weekend in Ted's shop in Pasadena. And SNF Saturday Night Fights. We used to do all sorts of events. Kind of died out in Southern California, but we did like Sawsbots, all these like Steel Conflict, all these events. And then it kind of died out. Martin Mason kind of started doing things again, of course, from Mad Catter, and with Mount Sac attached to that, as well as the makerspace down there. What's the makerspace? No, not Mountie Makerspace. That's newer. Maglab, sorry, Maglab. Had to remember Maglab. We've done tons of events there, and over the last so many years, we've now built up to where we're doing an event every month. So every month there is an insect combat robot event in Southern California, and that's been really big for me because even before that we were doing like 15-pound high school combat robots, and we were getting like 20 area high schools, and I was building kits, selling the kits through the NTMA, National Tooling and Machine Association, getting them out to these students, and they were building robots and creating events, and you got to see the basically all the builders in Southern California kind of retool. Like we got a bunch of new people in, BattleBots brought in a lot of new people, and you saw people start out like Calvin Eba, who started out building smaller robots, and he is now one of the best builders in those small robots, and he goes to Norwalk. But Southern California has really built up a thing, and I'm really proud of that. And going to Norwalk, and I started live streaming those events in Southern California, and I would live stream, produce the event, do this whole thing. I started on Twitch. Anyway, Norwalk has completely beat me in all regards. The production quality is absolutely phenomenal. The amount of staff that they have to run 88 Beetles in a single day and get it done relatively on time. Like I was amazed. I was assuming it was at least 3 a.m. East Coast time finishing. No, they finished so much earlier than I thought. They had so many robots, and just the facility is absolutely amazing. They have 5-6 cages dedicated to these robots, and running 30 pounders, 12 pounders, these smaller robots. I've always been a big proponent. Where I started 18 years ago, whatever, 19 years ago, I started with 1-pound robots. I know that building small is just, it's so much easier to get into cost wise, and you kind of have your own little robot, and allows you to build relationships with other people to then build bigger robots. And because you can't build a heavyweight alone, there's no way. You can't even lift the thing. I mean, some people can, but let's not talk about it. Anyways, I don't want to lift the robot and break my back. I'm getting too old for that. So it really requires a team. And starting small is really nice to build up into that and to understand a lot of concepts, because a lot of combat robots, there's not a lot of on the shelf parts that you can just buy and put in a robot and make it work, especially for some of these different weight classes. You have to modify things. And I started with like drills and weird batteries and weird components from like RC cars and airplanes, and you have to try to make them, modify them to work. Nowadays it's getting better, there's more kits available and so forth, but you still had to learn all these things, and having a team to support you doing that is really important to me. And it's just, it's built up, and Norwalk is one of those places where there's so much support there, and there's so much, the facility is just so amazing. Safety wise is super nice. They are broadcasting it, they're making shows, and it's just so impressed me with their capability that you have all these new builders that are coming in that I've never heard of, that are now rock stars in a community because they're building these awesome robots and fighting and winning and doing so great. And I just, it's such a great thing that the more community we have, and I think BattleBots has brought on a lot of more interest too. And it keeps building, and that's great for me because I'm big on education and getting, there's something about like the bloodthirsty, like fighting part of it that kind of brings kids into it. Like, it's not, yes, you do understand metallurgy and electromechanical and all this stuff you get to learn, but it's also like, it has the energy there to really keep kids interested and wanting to do it. And that's just really exciting for me to see, not only the smaller, all over the United States, we have events, but we have something that's building up to be just phenomenal in the NHRL and Norwalk.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's great, because I often talk about my daughter on the show. She's only 6.5 years old, and her first robot is not going to be a 250-pound robot. We're
Right.
gonna get a kid at some point, and we're gonna make a small one, and that's where we're gonna start. So
Yeah, that's super exciting. I mean, season 2, we had Katie Mason, Mark Mason's daughter. I think she was 12 at the time. And she even won the fight. She drove the robot, the 250-pound robot. We let her drive, and she's been fantastic at it. And the thing about combat robots for me has always been, I can educate people, which I absolutely love, getting kids interested in engineering and STEM and so forth. But it's such an equalizer, because you can have, I usually use the reference of a 90-year-old grandpa fighting against a 6-year-old girl. It does not matter. It doesn't matter your background. If you're an artist, if you're an engineer, you don't need anything really. The robots do the fighting. It doesn't matter how you're built or whatever disability. It's all about the robots in the cage doing the thing, and that's what's really great about it. Is it's such an equalizer in terms of that.
yeah, for sure. And you mentioned him, so quick shout out to Martin Mason. My cat says thank you for the shirt. um, so yeah, lots of great stuff there for sure. Another thing that I was curious about, I mean, especially because of the fact that you've been doing this for so long, is there's a lot of changes coming to BattleBots for the next season. With whether it be some of the rule changes, like with the controlled movement, with the unsticks. Obviously the shelf, the upper deck is still going to be there, unfortunately, but some of those other things, maybe are coming for the positive, as well as like builder like pay and things like that. What do you kind of think about that? Because I think a lot of these things have been some time coming. I think a lot of the fans are even really happy about this. So, as a builder, what do you think?
There's a lot of great things coming for sure. I know, back in season 2, we'd have a bit of a stipend that aided in building robots, and that was really good, especially early on, to get more robots built. And the fact that we're bringing that back now, because in China they also had pretty good cover, like a pretty nice stipend, and that really helped solidify robots, get robots built. And so BattleBots now doing this is just absolutely fantastic, because especially for Triton, which is a brand new robot, Deep Six is banned. We can't bring Deep Six. Now we have to build a whole new robot. I mean, and you can't just build one robot. You have to build two at least. And we're planning on trying to have at least 4 frames. And it's just like it's a lot. And not only the stipend, but also some of the sponsorship changes that have come, that we can now pursue some different sponsorship, as well as BattleBots helping us get sponsors. I think there's a lot of new avenues that they're understanding that these are extremely costly, and we have to have the ability to get them paid for outside of just our pocket. And we already put so much time in it. If you were to try to pay me the amount of time I put into these, there's no way. It's not affordable. So the money coming in, especially for a new robot like Triton, is so big. It's really allowing us to get these robots built. So I'm super excited about that. And that also means that other new robots, all other crazy designs that might come in, are going to have the potential to be built that wouldn't otherwise, if you did not have, because new robots are really hard to get sponsored sometimes. If you had no name at all and you're trying to bring something super cool, maybe a big sponsor wouldn't be interested, because they're already sponsoring their teams, or they don't have any interest in it, because it's like, oh, you're new, you don't have any proven record. Again, that's something like Norwalk that can help you out, where you can have a little robot and you could say, like, I'm scaling this up and show a record of something. But yeah, no, the pay is absolutely fantastic for that, the stipend rather. Yeah, that's just so huge. And then a lot of the other changes, like I said, the shelf is absolutely terrible for us. Hopefully, some fans like it somewhere, but please get rid of that. Greg Munson, please. Trey, please. But you know, there's some changes that are kind of for the better. Some that are kind of interesting. Some that I maybe don't necessarily agree with, but I still understand. Like some of the multi-bot changes that are kind of in place, of trying to get rid of like certain batteries, to try to make multi-bots still interesting, or mini bots. They're not multi-bots, mini bots specifically. They're trying to make it so that if they get destroyed, they're not as much of a hazard. They can get them out of the arena quickly and so forth. So they're trying to change some of the battery technology there to make them a little safer. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that, but at the same time, I understand why they're trying to do it. And it's just, it's always going slightly better. It's always headed in a slightly better direction. I think it's sometimes moving too slow, but ultimately you have a lot of different gears in the system that you have to deal with in terms of BattleBots and the production companies and everyone involved, that it can be a bit of a trial to get things changed for the better when it's kind of a new sport that not a lot of people are really, it's not really pinned down on how it's still new to some degree. It's been around for a while, but it's still not something that people have defined really well yet. So, just in terms of how do you make it fair and balanced and still a competition, a real sport, and be able to afford to do so. So I think that this season's going to be fantastic because of those stipend changes, because of some of the sponsorship availability, and I'm super excited to have a new robot that it gets built and comes into it because of those changes. And I'm looking forward to what we can do in the future with live shows, how that progresses and how that influences new robots coming in as well, because of that. And just seeing the sport grow, and then that trickles down to, NHRL, that it'll trickle down to small SoCal events, Seattle events, Arizona, Las Vegas, all over the place. There's all these events, and it all kind of trickles down. So I'm just really excited about the whole process and about it getting bigger and better and just continually improving.
Yeah, that's a very great point. I mean, because for the casual fans that maybe just watch BattleBots, they may not be aware of all of the different events that there are out there. I mean, I even wasn't aware for a long time, but there are so many in so many different parts of the country. If there's any event organizers and stuff like that are watching this and live in the Midwest, please make a really big, cool event in the Midwest for me to go to. That would be really awesome. I know there's a couple, but I mean, here in Indiana, it's a little bit of a dead zone. So
yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, I don't know the Midwest as well. I mean, I know Texas, of course, has some excellent events, but I don't really know the Midwest that well personally. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is seeing them in person is completely different. Even the little ones are
yeah,
really entertaining, and getting a sense of these little tiny, like 1 pound robot, and it's like bouncing all over the walls, is something else. When you see BattleBots in person, you can feel the rumble in the ground. And something big like Robo Games coming back, that's going to be a fantastic event for people to go to, where you have all the different weight classes and you can really get a sense of it, because the air changes when Deep Six hits a robot. Like you just feel, you can feel it, and it's just so intense to see it in person, and it's a totally different experience. And I obviously have been to so many events now that it's hard for me to watch it on TV or on YouTube or something. It's so much like I want to see it in person. I don't want to see it on television anymore. But I do like still watching it, simply because you get the recap of it and you get to see different angles that you maybe experience it differently, especially when you're driving or you're fighting or it's your robot. You remember things completely differently than how they actually went. So seeing like all the different angles is in the slow motion and all, that's just fantastic. But seeing it in person is so excellent. Go find your local event, help them out, support them if you can. If they have tickets or shirts or whatever, go there, bring a little robot yourself. Most of them are very open and supportive, and that's really been something that has kept it alive. If it wasn't for those smaller events like Steel Conflict or Robo Games, or even the little tiny robot events, and now Norwalk, if those events didn't exist, BattleBots would have trouble continuing to have new fresh talent come on, because you just would have the same robots over and over again. I really think that the show benefits from having new robots cycle through and getting new designs in there. Just like a sports team would have new players, that phase out, and you get a new robot that people can become a fan of. I think it's really important to have new robots, and to continue to make it interesting and change up the meta by design changes. So yeah, it's really phenomenal. And I really support any small event that you can. Just go out and see them in person. So great.
definitely. I don't think that I could have phrased that better. Yeah, it's a great community. It's really important to continue building the community. And that's a big part of the show and the intention of this show. So well, it was really great to have you on the show, Brad. I am so excited for Triton. I want to see this robot in action. So looking forward to that.
Thank you so much for having me. And you know, we're excited. We're going to be releasing Triton information soon. It just keeps coming out. And like I said, we're getting parts in, we're building. But we're going to have some exciting merch stuff coming up for some preseason stuff to help support the robot, because it is very costly to build a brand new robot. But we want fans to see big, large weapon, because some fans I know like big, large weapon, and that's what we're bringing. We're bringing the maximum. We're bringing the deep six rule weapon size that we can, and we're just super excited to have all the fans from D6 be interested in the robot as well. And really, this is Dustin's baby that I am building. He's building his own babies, his twins that are coming. So I get to now work on this robot. I'm just super excited about the whole thing. And again, thank you for supporting the community and talking to all of us. And I really enjoy getting more word out there, especially about the other events, and letting people know that, you know, this is a community and you can get involved really easily. And there's really great benefit to education and to, you know, just the excitement, entertainment, and all that. So support who you can, and go to your local events and see BattleBots. Come to BattleBots Live.
Yes,
See Triton.
come to Battlebots Live, see
Yeah.
Triton, and all of that exciting stuff. We have lots of good content coming up soon, so keep following and subscribing and everything, and we will see you next time on the show.